All right, welcome back, Powers on Sports podcast. It is week one of the National Football League. We've just wrapped up week one of the full college football schedule, and no better person to talk to. A guy that covers both. You'll see some of the nuggets he provides to his colleagues on the Saturday on CBS Big Ten package with Gary Danielson, Brad Nessler, and you will also hear some of his nuggets with Troy Aikman and Joe Buck Monday Night Football. One David Moulton, friend of the program, friend of the podcast. David is also the host of the Miller and Moulton radio show, syndicated radio show. He's a Sirius XM host, does lots of things during the football season. Welcome back to the podcast, Mr. Moulton.
Wow, you make me sound busy. I should be making more money from all that work. Damn. Great to be here, Jason.
Well, I know you'll have some more frequent flyer miles that you'll be going to Big Ten country every week as opposed to the SEC.
Yeah, make a dadgum good point there, as Bobby Bowden would say.
Talk to me about just summer wise. Just give me a couple of your thoughts of going into the week of the NFL season. Just some general thoughts of some storylines that are of interest to you.
Well, the fascinating thing to me right now, on the eve of the season, if you will, or it's just going to kick off when people are listening, is, historically, whether we had 12 playoff teams, 5 of the 12 from the year before wouldn't make it. Well, the first 2 years of having 14 playoff teams, 6 of the 14 haven't made it. So, Jason, I think we're all asking ourselves, we know 5 or 6 of last year's playoff teams aren't going to make the playoffs this year, but which ones?
Right.
Because if you think about it, nobody's really jumping off a Dallas or Philly train to make the playoffs. Nobody's thinking the Lions are going to regress and miss the playoffs. Nobody's thinking the Niners. Very few people think the Packers are going to miss the playoffs. Well, then that's 5 repeat teams alone.
Right.
The Bucks have made the playoffs 4 years in a row. They've actually won that division 3 years in a row. No one gives them credit for it.
Zero.
Now, in the AFC, Bills haven't missed the playoffs this decade. All right. We know everybody in the North had a winning season last year. 3 of them made the playoffs. Kansas City's won the division seemingly since football was created. I mean, so you tell me, who right now are you confidently going to say, yeah, they ain't making the playoffs next year? It seems in our mind like we've got 10 or 11 repeat teams that we're confident about for this year, but history is telling us we're going to be wrong.
No doubt. Nobody thought Houston came out of nowhere last year.
I mean, Houston,
Jason.
A year ago at this time, if you had said the team with the second worst record in the league and a rookie quarterback and a first-year head coach was going to win the division.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, they would have said, I'm sorry, we have to pull your sponsorship. We can't do this podcast anymore.
A storyline for me is going to be the quarterback situation. Two realms of the spectrum here. One, you've obviously got the rookie quarterbacks, all the anticipation with Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix has kind of come. A lot of excitement there out of Bo Nix. And on the other side of the ledger is, how will the old guys, Rodgers and Cousins, recover from injuries? We don't see much out of the quarterbacks and Achilles. We don't see many Achilles injuries at that position.
Now I will say Marino.
Right, that's the guy.
I'm dating myself here. You got to go back 30 years. In fact, today, when we're recording this, it was the 30th anniversary of when Marino's first game back from the Achilles, and he threw for over 400 yards and 5 touchdowns in a mud storm, if you will, to beat Bledsoe and the Patriots. So we've seen some quarterbacks come back from it, but also add Russell Wilson to your list.
Right.
He's 35, 36, and he didn't have a good year last year, and Seattle let him go the year before that. So we got 3 veterans in which you're right. 2 coming back from injury. 1, we don't know if he's any good anymore. And the other thing is, it looks as if Jacoby Brissett's not going to be long for that job in New England. You might as well throw Drake May onto the pile that we're probably going to have 4 rookie quarterbacks play a lot this year.
Right. Give me a thought on the rookies. Which of the 3 do you think are in the? Obviously, most people think Caleb is in the best spot to do well this year, just from what you've seen preseason wise and just the guys you talk to around the league. Who do you think has a chance to be maybe the best guy at the end of this year? A lot of people think Jaden Daniels might be.
You're stealing my thunder here, because I think if of the rookies who could take a team that was in the outhouse and potentially make them a playoff team, I think Daniels is the guy. I think he's a star. Now, Caleb, I have to admit, I had my doubts last year at USC. He played a lot of hero ball. It was
Yep.
clear the teammates didn't like him. They were thrilled when he left. He apparently is not that guy with the Bears. And the fact that they made him a captain year one, I
Right.
thought showed me something because the Bears have acquired some veterans on that team. And I don't think the veterans would have let him be named captain if they didn't believe in him. I mean, Jason, you and I have been doing this a while. Can you imagine if the Bears actually have a stud quarterback? If the Bears, if Caleb Williams is 3/4 of the hype, they haven't had that. I mean, they've yet to have a 4,000-yard passing season from one of their quarterbacks. I mean, in history.
Eric Kramer's got the most yards ever for them.
And I think, is Cutler second? I mean, seriously. So just imagine, and you're right, though. Caleb's in the best situation. They won 7 games last year. They've upgraded the roster. And Eberflus, the guys seem comfortable with him now. I don't know that they were with him and the staff the first 2 years. I think there's a chance, last year, Jason, the AFC North had 3 playoff teams. I think there's a real chance this year the NFC North has 3 playoff teams.
I'm with you. That may be one of the more competitive. Even Minnesota, I know they've lost McCarthy, but they may not be great, but they'll be a pain in the neck to somebody at some point, I think.
I will say Flores defensively, he had him in the top 10 last year. I think he'll do it again this year. It's just tough to think Sam Darnold would have to have the Baker season from last year or the Geno Smith season from 2022. And let's face it, none of us have confidence in Carson Palmer. Or
In
excuse
your
me.
in your mind, is the AFC still the dominant conference with all the
Oh,
quarterback
yeah.
power that's in the AFC?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's amazing to me, Jason, is not only did we have 14 playoff teams with winning records, we had 5 other teams in the NFL had winning records who missed the playoffs. I mean, you got Cincinnati, Jacksonville, Indianapolis in the AFC, and Seattle and New Orleans in the NFC. So do those, remember Detroit 2 years ago was a 9-8 team on the rise who just missed the playoffs and they kept rising. Are any of those 9-8 teams, Jags, Colts, Bengals, Bengals 9-8, Burrow didn't play over half the year.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, are those 9-8 teams on the rise or are they on the fall? Most people think Seattle's on the fall, New Orleans on the fall. I'm not high on the Colts because I don't believe in Anthony Richardson. Joe Flacco may have to reproduce the year he did for Cleveland last year for Indianapolis this year, in my estimation. I think that was a very risky pick, and it's feast or famine, I think, Richardson. And when you're scrimmaging against the Bengals and the Bengals defensive players are mocking you in a scrimmage to your face saying, stop running the ball, throw the ball, pick a receiver and throw it. I mean, that's the opposing defense in a scrimmage. And that shows me that maybe the kid's not yet ready.
And he has not played much at Florida. We know obviously that there's a history of not playing a whole lot in college. How that kind of correlates to slower development in the NFL, and it'll be interesting to see. And again, it came off the shoulder injury and all that stuff last year, so we will be interested to see. Give me a team or two. I know you're into schedules. Give me a kind of a division versus division schedule that's of interest to you in these cross divisions. You know how the AFC will obviously play an NFC schedule. I mean the NFC South gets the AFC West as an example. So the Bucks are going to get. I know the Bucks in the first 4 weeks of the year get 2 rookie quarterbacks. You get Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels in the first couple of weeks of the year. So I think that's a little bit of an advantage for Tampa as an example. It's interesting how these division matchups are so important in the scheduling. AFC North. I mean, just the power of those divisions. Give me one that's of interest to you.
Well, let's just say that there's a team out there that you think might not be as good this year. And that team for me is Dallas. I think Dallas has real weaknesses, and I worry if they get off to a rough start and their early season schedule is difficult. That I just wonder, everybody knows the coach is a lame duck if they lose. The quarterback, as of now, hasn't signed. He could
Right.
also be a lame duck. I just think they've got issues on the offensive line. They don't have a running back that anyone else in the league would take. All right. So I worry about the Cowboys. Well, the NFC East teams this year play the AFC North,
Yeah.
including Dallas opening up with Cleveland. I mean, that's a much tougher crossover schedule than what you had a year ago. Meanwhile, look at the road the Chiefs have. They're obviously terrific, but their crossover division's the NFC South. Well, I mean, Carolina and New Orleans aren't going to be competitive. I mean, minimum 3-1 they go
Right.
crossover,
Right.
and they've got their division, which they dominate. So, in terms of looking as to who's going to be the one seed, I know the Chiefs were the 3 last year, but it looks as if their crossover is a little easier last year than it was, or this year than it was last year. So
Right.
that's the, AFC North, for example. They've got the NFC East. So they should be able to make hay against the NFC East, right? Even if they split with the Eagles and the Cowboys, they should go no worse than 3-1 in their crossovers. So, yes. Now I'm more schedule for college than pro, but yes, I am a schedule guy. I mean, 3 of the 17 games are different for every team, so it's just a matter of what those games will be.
Your first opening Monday night game on Monday night, you'll be out in San Francisco. Rodgers obviously's return with the 49ers. Obviously, a lot of drama with both those teams. Obviously, with the holdout situations with San Francisco, with Ayuk and Trent Williams back now. What? Just give me a thought on Rodgers. Do you think we know what Rodgers has been, but we know what Rodgers has been the last couple of years. Just give me your thought on Rodgers, and do you think he can kind of bring this circus together?
Well, I think the question, obviously, we expect that he'll play more than 4 plays. But the question is he going to be 2021 Rodgers or 2022 Rodgers? The 2021 Rodgers wasn't, I think he won the MVP, and the Packers were the 1 seed before getting upset in the playoffs. The 2022 Rodgers slipped, and the Packers slipped, and they missed the playoffs. So, you know, which Rodgers are we going to get? Does he have, remember, Brett Favre had that golden year in Minnesota in which
Yep.
he turned 40 in October of that season. And he was tremendous. They were a play away from the Super Bowl. Does Rodgers still have one of those years in him? Or is Rodgers going to fall back to being the 8th best quarterback, the 12th best quarterback in the league, which is what 41-year-old quarterbacks often look like? So that to me is the big one. The offensive line is improved if it stays healthy. They're counting on 2 old tackles who
Right.
haven't been healthy to stay healthy. That's a big risk. I'll say this, Jason. Forget the Monday night opener. Titans, Patriots, Broncos, Vikings.
Yep.
If the Jets are for real, they should be no worse than 4-1 when they host the Bills on Monday Night Football in mid-October.
Right.
Say it again. Titans, Patriots, Broncos. The Vikings game is in London. All
You
right.
have to
So
win those games. If you're a team,
yeah,
you got to win those games.
exactly. If you're going to challenge for the AFC East, you need to be no worse than 4-1. And if you steal the opener, great.
Do you think this is the last hurrah for this core in San Francisco due to the salary cap, having to pay Brock Purdy next year and all that stuff more than likely?
The Niners currently have 42 free agents amongst the 69 guys for next at the end of this year. 42. Now, obviously, they're not all key. They now have 8 players making 15 million or more.
Right.
Tough to envision. They're already, I think, over 30 million over next year's cap. Tough to envision they can keep both Ayuk and Debo. That Debo,
Kittle.
okay, well, they kind of need Kittle though. I mean, with that offense,
Right,
heavy, they're over 50% run. No team plays at a slower tempo or runs the ball more than the Niners. I would argue Kittle is more important than whoever their number one wide receiver is, as long as he stays healthy.
right,
So you would think, Jason, that this is the last year of this core, because the other thing is they got to pay Purdy after this year,
right.
and they ain't going to get him on the cheap.
Do you think he's the? I mean, I know you've seen him both years, couple years. Do you think he's? I mean, do you think he's the guy?
All right, forget my opinion. Steve Spagnuolo after the Super Bowl, and we all think Steve's one of the best defense coordinators out
Yep.
there. He was asked about, hey, what'd you do? And he said, well, I'll tell you what, Brock Purdy was a lot better than we thought. We had to change our defense at halftime. We could not play zone against him. He picked us apart. He's very accurate. He makes very quick decisions. And if you think about it, and he's a leader. Remember, even the Niners talked about when he was the fourth string quarterback, he came into the huddle and told them all to shut the blank up. It's my huddle. Shut up. Okay. So he's a leader who's accurate and makes good, quick decisions. I don't know, Jason. That sounds like a 80-90% of the way on to being a very good quarterback. So when Steve Spagnuolo said we had to change our defense because of how good Brock Purdy was, I went, he might be better than most of us think.
Do you think Dak Prescott gets to free agency?
I do. I do. If he's not signed by Sunday, I do. I think that Dak's never accepted a penny less. All right. He hasn't. Some quarterbacks have. Tom Brady took less money. The
Yep.
Mannings never took less money. Okay. Dak is one of those. He doesn't leave a dime on the table. Okay. And so, yeah, I think it is getting personal that all the other teams signed their quarterbacks this
Right.
offseason and you didn't sign me. Yes. I think Dak knows that whatever he's asking for in Dallas, he'll get and a dollar more elsewhere.
Give me an assistant coach who you think is going to make a huge difference in a new spot, whether as a coordinator, maybe a Liam Cohen in Tampa, Jeff Hafley in Green Bay, somebody like that. Give me somebody who's piqued your interest of new coordinator in a new spot that could really make a big difference.
Who's the offensive coordinator in Washington?
Kingsbury.
Yeah, that with Daniels, I think Washington may have been the worst coach team in the league last year. I thought the guys gave up on Rivera, and I thought that the offense coordinator. I mean, for Washington to throw the ball the most with a first year essentially playing quarterback. I mean, they set Sam Howell up for failure, and the guys quit playing for Jack Del Rio. They
Yeah.
just did. So I think the upgrade in coaching in Washington this year is going to be tremendous. I also think they had a very good offseason. I think Washington's going to win a minimum of 7. And I really think they're going to get to at least 8. And I think Washington will actually play some games at the end of the year where they have a chance to sneak in as the 7 seed.
Interesting.
Like I believe Washington and Dallas play very late in the season. It wouldn't shock me because I got the Cowboys slipping and I got Washington big on the rise. Wouldn't shock me if that's our surprise game at the end of the year, like the Texans Colts were
Right.
last year in terms of winners in, losers out.
Interesting because Washington opens here in Tampa Sunday afternoon, late kickoff here with obviously.
Keep in mind, CJ Stroud and the Texans started 0-2 last year.
Right.
Okay. I mean, and CJ did not look good in the preseason last year. So just take a deep breath. Let's get, 0-2, 1-3, 17 games. Okay. They still, in the NFC especially, where 9 oftentimes has gotten you in.
True. Very good point. Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Real conflict or a little overblown or somewhere in between?
No, real conflict. I mean, even both guys have acknowledged that they just weren't on the same page. And Sirianni's coaching for his job because the Eagles have made no secret of how much they love Belichick. I mean, they seriously contemplated making the move last offseason. So, I don't know. And I think Nick is looking at Jalen going, so we got you Saquon. We got you three receivers now.
Right.
We got you a top six tight end in the league, and we got you a top five offensive line. If we're not destroying people on offense, whose fault is it? You're going to blame me and the offensive coordinator again? Or can we look at you and go, hey, buddy, what's going on?
Right. And they bring in Fangio to run the defense,
Mm-hmm.
who's a
When
very
they
pretty good
wanted a year
defensive
ago.
guy.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, last one. I'll get you out of here. Give me your thoughts on Belichick entering the media, and then obviously the aura of Belichick still in the coaching realm of possibility here.
Well, first off, those of us in the media knew Bill would be really good because we saw what he did with NFL Network with the top 100 players of all
Right.
time. I mean, he was nominated for an Emmy. All right. If Bill wants to be, Bill can be terrific. I mean, Bill just hasn't wanted to be like his buddy Nick Saban. Nick had shown his personality over the years. Bill didn't want to. My only thing, Jason, is that if Bill goes back into coaching, don't go back and be the blankety blank that you were in New England. Okay, leave that guy in New England. You don't have to be as gregarious as you are now, but could you just be human with us? Reporter asks a question, give more than a four-word answer. I don't think you can be Mr. NFL this year because he's everywhere.
Right.
Okay. And then get a coaching job and then go back to being we're on to Cincinnati.
Darth Vader. Right.
Yeah. I mean, could you meet us halfway?
Right.
I think this is part of he didn't get offers because he got blackballed. The Patriots said bad things about him. A lot of people said, oh, you don't want to deal with him and his personality. I think this is very intentional by Bill. Bill wants to go back and coach one more time. He wants to beat Shula's record. He needs about 3 good seasons to do it.
Right.
He'll be 73 next year.
Right.
If he doesn't get a job this offseason, he's probably done.
I would agree with
this
that.
is all intentional to try to show he's a good guy and increase his likability.
No doubt. All right, listen to David Moulton, ESPN, CBS on Saturdays, college football, ESPN Monday Night Football with Buck and Aitman, Sirius XM host, Miller and Moulton. Tell the audience where they can find Miller and Moulton online and such if they're not in the state of Florida.
MillerandMoulton.com. You can download it at 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern, and the show is put up in podcast form within a half an hour of it ending. We have a lot of good guests.
Great guests.
Every week during the football season. So MillerandMoulton.com, check us out.
And you can find David on Twitter and X at the David Moulton, kind of like the Ohio State.
Yeah, it's obnoxious. I didn't make my own Twitter handle. Okay, someone else did for me, and I have to admit, if I had that to do over again, I'd change. That's obnoxious. I mean, like the David Moulton. Who the hell am I? I mean, that's terrible.
You're a big timer, man. Come on.
Oh yeah, big time. I'm not even big time in my own household, Jason. Come on now.
All right, I'm going to ask you a couple college football questions. I'll get you out of here just as we get through the college football season. You know the state of Florida very well. You've been in this state for a long time, and you've obviously covered the SEC for a long time. What's going on at Florida?
They're not good at the line of scrimmage, and it's tough to be a good team if you're not strong at the point of attack. Their defensive line is not better than it was a year ago. In fact, they lost their best 2 defensive ends in the transfer portal. Their best offensive lineman, I think they lost in right guard in the transfer portal.
How can they not get a quarterback in Gainesville, a big-time quarterback?
Well, they got the 5-star kid who we may be seeing him now for the rest of the season. Right. We don't know with Mertz and concussion protocol. But the problem is, Jason, you can't play the hardest schedule maybe in the history of the sport and be bad at the point of attack.
Right.
Okay. Also, most of their really good talent is still young. It's still first or second year players. So Florida's a year behind where Miami and Florida State was under Mike Norvell. The problem for Napier is he may not see year 4.
And up in Tallahassee, I mean, this is one of the effects of NIL. When you pay a guy $1 million plus and he's average and he was never great at Clemson or Oregon State, and you bring him in and think he's going to be way better than he's ever been. Well,
this is twofold, Jason. It's that, and it's also living in the transfer portal. Norvell crushed the transfer portal the previous 2 seasons.
Right.
Crushed it. Obviously, and even though he brought in talent, the guys apparently are not buying in. Like with Jordan Travis as the leader, the
Right.
team bought in for 2 years. There is a void of leadership with Florida State right now. And I don't know how you get that once the season has already started, if you know what I mean, unless you make a change at quarterback and maybe bring in the third stringer from last year who some people wanted them to stick with this year. So they've got a leadership problem. I mean, when the coach is saying publicly, we have a leadership problem.
Right.
The guys are not playing hard enough. They haven't bought in. Too many guys got paid and are like, hey, man, I'll be in the league next year. I don't care. You know, that's the danger of living in the portal in the NIL world. And I love Norvell. He has not done as good a job recruiting the high school scene as even
Correct.
Napier has done, never mind the job Mario's done. And so now he doesn't have good enough players to fall back on to sit the guys that he brought in. So listen, they got Memphis. They have a bye week this week. They got Memphis, who may be the
Yes.
best group of 5 team in the country. And after a supposed cupcake at Cal, they're at SMU and they got Clemson. I mean, they could be 1-5, 2-4 here. Don't
No,
kid yourself.
no doubt. No doubt. Are you a believer in only one coming out of the Big 12 and the ACC as far as the playoff go?
I'm a believer in only one coming out of the Big 12. I wonder if Miami's domination of Florida, which was very highly rated, by the way, a lot of people saw it, nearly
Yep.
7 million. I wonder if Miami, Jason, could throw an 11-1 type season up there and lose a close ACC title game and still get a bid. I think right now, barring how this season plays out, Miami is the hope for the ACC of getting 2 teams, but we'll see.
And in your conference, the conference you're going to be covering week to week in the college football world, the Big Ten. I mean, you've got some monster matchups potentially down the road. USC had a huge win against LSU. They looked much improved on the defensive side. Miller Moss kid looks like he's a legit player at quarterback. Just give me a thought or two about the Big Ten and Oregon. Obviously, we saw Oregon struggle, but I think that's more of just a look ahead kind of situation more than anything else. But give me a thought or two about the Big Ten.
Well, they also had over 500 yards of offense. They just had 2 turnovers in the red zone. They actually
Right.
dominated Idaho, but we're only up 17-14 late. Best win of the week, you could argue, was USC over LSU because it may get the Big Ten an extra bid at the end of the year. Ohio State is legit, although their offensive line is not elite at all.
Right.
Okay, that will be the key to Ohio State's season. Watch their offensive line. They also don't have an elite tight end. But defensively, by the way, they're really, really good. Their Michigan of last year, where all those players who could have gone to the draft have all came back. Now
Right.
they had to pay them, but they all came back, so who cares? Listen, USC beat LSU, so now Michigan gets their shot at Texas, and Wisconsin's going to get a shot at Alabama, and both Michigan and Wisconsin are at home. So these become big non-conference games at the end of the year when we're deciding, does the SEC or the Big Ten get the extra bid that's floating out there?
Right.
So I think Michigan, Texas is really big. Texas needs to win it for the SEC. The SEC went 1-3 in the big non-conference games. Vandy did beat Vatech, but in the big non-conference games, the SEC went 1-3. All right, SEC needs Texas to win this week. They need Tennessee to beat NC State.
How impressed were you with Georgia? I mean, they just boat raced them in the second half. The first half was competitive, but the second half, you saw the depth and just the power of Georgia, in my view.
3 straight undefeated regular seasons.
40 regular season games in a row they've won,
right?
Which is incredible.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what? The only team they lost to the last 2 years is Alabama? Last 3 years. I think the only team that they've lost to the last 3 years is Alabama a couple times. So, yeah, they have a terrific quarterback who's a likely first-round pick. So, barring injury, it is very difficult to see Georgia A, even though they have a challenging schedule. They do. Last year's schedule was cupcake. This year's schedule's not.
Very.
But Difficult to see Georgia not making at least the SEC championship game and having no worse than a home playoff game in the playoff. And they're probably the toughest out
And
right
what,
now. I mean, they're, when the NCAA tournament starts and we circle the team, I don't know if they're going to win it, but this is the toughest out. And
right.
most years it's Duke. This it's Georgia. Georgia's still the toughest out.
And the last question I'll get you out of the guy you've been around a lot is now in the broadcast world with ESPN, Nick Saban. Give me a thought or two about DeBoer and just that environment he's getting into in Tuscaloosa, that pressure cooker. Do you think he? I mean, I think he's up for it. What do you think?
Well, I'm impressed with the fact that he's doing his own thing. I mean, he is. He has no problem. He changed the locker room, he changed the decor, he changed the office. I mean, he has said Nick's a legend and what have you. I got to do it my way. A big thing for him, Jason, was he has a right-hand guy that he has brought with him every step of the way. And other teams came after that guy, threw big money at him. USC threw nearly $1 million a year at him. He kept him.
Yep.
Okay. And if you've noticed, Alabama, after all those players initially left in the transfer portal, Alabama ended up having a really good transfer portal. Alabama is number one in a lot of recruiting circles right now. So DeBoer is not having a talent void in which everybody's gone, oh, no, Nick Saban, I'm not going to Tuscaloosa anymore. To me, it's all about, is Milroe a good enough passer when he needs to be? An elite runner, gets out of the pocket, look out. But, they didn't beat Michigan because Jason Milroe threw for about 120 yards.
Right.
They almost lost to an average Auburn team, if not for a miracle throw in the corner of the end zone. To me, whether or not they're elite is if he can beat good teams throwing the ball.
David
And think
Moulton,
about it.
great.
They host Georgia. They're at Tennessee.
Yep.
I mean, Bama also has a schedule this year. Obviously, LSU. I mean, they've got a schedule this year.
Tricky game at Wisconsin. They should handle, but you never know.
I think they also have Oklahoma. I mean, they have a tricky, more difficult than we've come to expect of Georgia and Alabama schedules this year.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, David Moulton, great job. You're going to catch David on. He'll be in up in Iowa City, I believe, Saturday for Iowa State, Iowa. Rocco Becht, who's a Tampa kid, he's going to be the quarterback for Iowa State.
Yep.
I know that should be a good little nice. That's a really good rivalry up there. That's kind of undervalued nationally. That's a really good. And you're going to be at some great venues here in the Big Ten throughout the year: USC, Michigan.
Notre Dame.
All the big places. You'll be at all the big spots. So keep up the great work with Brad and Gary, and then you'll see with Troy and Joe on Monday night. Little frequent flyer miles from Iowa City to San Francisco. Good luck with that, and have a great year. I really appreciate the time you do this for me every year, and I really appreciate it.
I will miss all the places I'd gotten to know in the Atlanta airport. Okay. I will miss because I'm going to be going through O'Hare.
I was going to say Chicago. Yep.
Yep.
There you go. Appreciate the time, David. Have a great year, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
Jason, call anytime. Be good.